On February 24, 2018, two commercial airline pilots reported an unusual sighting while flying over southern Arizona.
Was anybody above us that passed us like 30 seconds ago?
Number 71 Papa Golf negative.
Okay. A UFO. Yeah.
American 1095, let me know if you see anything pass over you here in the next 15 miles.
You know if anything passes over?
American 1095, affirmative. We had an aircraft in front of you that's 37 that reported something pass over him, and we didn't have any targets, so just let me know if you see anything pass over you.
It's American 1095, yeah, something just passed over us. Like a, don't know what it was, but it's at least 3,000 feet above us, so yeah, it passed right over the top of us.
Okay, American 1095, thank you.
The official statement from the FAA regarding the incident reads, "Other than the brief conversation between two aircraft, the controller was unable to verify that any other aircraft was in the area." According to the book UFOs Over Arizona, the true history of extraterrestrial encounters in the Grand Canyon state, mysterious sightings of unidentified aircraft have been reported in the region for over a century. One of the earliest known reports took place in the northern Arizona city of Winslow, sometime during the mid-1900s. Gene Holden, a game warden, observed a large and extremely bright object, which he described as a silver tin plate, soar across the sky. While an early account like this one certainly captures the imagination, especially due to the fact that it predates the UFO sighting craze of the late 1940s by at least 30 years. It's important to note some Native American tribes in Arizona were ancient stargazers, who witnessed a variety of strange aerial phenomena. The Hopi, one of the oldest living cultures in the world, for example, spoke of certain flying shields, and ships without wings shaped like domes, capable of traveling long distances in a short period of time, hundreds of years before modern-day UFO sightings were made public. Petroglyphs, or rock carvings in some cases, even depict strange entities with large heads and antennae, whom the Hopi refer to as the Ant People, leading many to believe the Hopi not only saw UFOs, but peacefully interacted with alien beings. Coming up next, more on the history of UFO sightings in Arizona, including some of the most famous cases ever reported. Welcome to episode 10 of El Presidio Project.
Uncovering the creepy side of the old Pueblo. This is El Presidio Project. Strange Tales of Tucson.
When I was a little girl, one of my favorite shows was The Twilight Zone. And if I remember correctly, reruns of the original series used to air on Saturday nights. So I would jump from The Twilight Zone to Elvira's B-movie horror show. The Mistress of the Dark series was always a good time, but I was more a fan of The Twilight Zone and its amazing stories. Like To Serve Man, The Invaders, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, just to name a few. And when I got older, I fell in love with a show on the relatively new, at the time, Fox network called The X-Files. This episode is sort of a nod to all of them. I hope you enjoy it. Here is episode 10, Unidentified. The year was 1947. In late June, while flying near Mount Rainier in Washington state, pilot Kenneth Arnold witnessed multiple disc-shaped objects. The United States Air Force would later officially label Arnold's sighting as a mirage. 2 weeks later, William Rhodes of Phoenix, Arizona, heard a strange sound on the evening of July 7th. Thinking it was a jet, Mr. Rhodes grabbed his camera and quickly made his way outside. To his complete surprise, he saw a flying disc hovering in the sky. Before the object veered and flew away at an amazingly high speed, he managed to capture it on film. These pictures would come to be known as the Rhodes photos, which appeared, with the photographer's permission, in the July 9th edition of the Arizona Republic newspaper. Eventually, the photos were carefully examined by experts and confirmed to be authentic. This caught the attention of Kenneth Arnold, the pilot who only a couple of weeks before had seen multiple flying discs over Mount Rainier. Arnold stated publicly the object Rhodes had captured on film and the objects he witnessed were similar in both size and shape. But it turns out Kenneth Arnold wasn't the only one interested in the similarities between these unidentified flying discs. The United States government was interested as well. A short 48 hours after the photos were published in the Arizona Republic, William Rhodes was visited at his home by an FBI agent and a lieutenant colonel of the United States Air Force. According to Rhodes, he was interrogated and asked to hand over the photo negatives of the object he captured. During their meeting, he was told the negatives would be returned to him. They never were. In fact, when he tried contacting the FBI a few years later, they denied having any knowledge of the incident whatsoever. But the story doesn't end there. During the time of the Rhodes photo event, there were other UFO sightings in Arizona, in Douglas, Yuma, and Tucson. The Tucson sighting was witnessed by 3 men, one of them a former United States Air Force pilot. They all claimed to have seen an oval-shaped metallic object over the East Side Mountains. The strange sightings continued over the next few days, one being reported as far south as Nogales near the Mexican border. And while all this activity was going on in Arizona, one state over in New Mexico, government officials were dealing with a little incident in the town of Roswell. A local rancher had recovered pieces of a wreckage just outside of town. Unable to properly identify the dismantled object, he then delivered the pieces to the local sheriff, who contacted the Roswell Army Airfield. On July 8, 1947, the Roswell Daily newspaper ran a story about the crash which stated, "The intelligence office of the 509th Bombardment Group at Roswell Army Airfield announced at noon today that the field has come into the possession of a flying saucer." Soon after, the military changed its findings and officially declared the wreckage was a downed weather balloon. And so, with that, rumors of conspiracy surrounding the famous Roswell incident were born. Was it a weather balloon? Was it a failed nuclear test device? Or was it an actual flying saucer? People have theorized and extensively investigated this case for over 70 years. Due to the timeline of events that occurred between June and July of '47, some have even speculated the strange object that crashed in Roswell might have been a part of a group of UFOs that appeared over the Southwest. The flying disc witnessed by William Rhodes in Phoenix is believed to have been a part of the same group. Nationwide reports of flying saucers kept pouring in, and in time the United States Air Force formed an official group to investigate UFO sightings. This group was given the name Project Blue Book. According to Preston Dennett, author of UFOs over Arizona, Project Blue Book investigated hundreds of sightings in the state, but only 13 of these cases were officially labeled unidentified. Project Blue Book investigators were reluctant to give sightings unidentified status, as it was in their best interest to find a logical explanation when it came to these mysterious sightings. But due to the credibility of many of the witnesses, many of whom were former and current members of the United States military at the time of their experiences, it was difficult to brush their stories aside as solely being a huge misunderstanding, even if that was the official excuse given by the government. On February 2, 1950, a pilot from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base was flying a B-29 over Tucson when he spotted a UFO. He chased the object, but it was traveling at a speed he wasn't able to keep up with. According to an article I found, a B-29 is capable of reaching a max speed of about 350 miles per hour. Whatever he saw eventually disappeared behind a mountain range. Within 24 hours of this sighting, Davis-Monthan officials put out a statement declaring what the pilot had seen were vapor trails from another airplane. It's hard to imagine an experienced pilot would mistake the two. What exactly were these flying objects? And why was the military claiming them to be mirages and vapor trails? The American public wanted to know. September 1952. 3 sightings in Tucson were declared unidentified by Project Blue Book. Case number 2038 occurred within the first few days of the month, when 2 pilots witnessed a flat, circular-shaped object move around in a strange sweeping motion. A few days later, Arizona's first Congresswoman, Isabella King, saw a tear-shaped object, orange in color, descend, then unexpectedly shoot upward. This was labeled case number 2048. On September 17th, a man and his wife spotted 3 shiny flat objects, similar to what the 2 pilots had seen in the sky a couple of weeks earlier. According to the witnesses, these objects were flying in formation, and minutes later, a second wave of objects followed. Case number 2015. By the following year, UFO reports had become much more complicated, even for Project Blue Book. According to a story released by researcher Raymond Fowler, a UFO crashed near the northwest city of Kingman, Arizona, in May of 1953. The eyewitness and subject of the story was a United States Air Force engineer named Arthur Stanzel, who was given the pseudonym Fritz Werner to protect his identity at the time. Stanzel came forward with the story and even signed a legal affidavit stating his account was true. While working on a project with the Atomic Energy Commission, Stanzel was ordered to report to a special assignment in the Southwest. Joined by over a dozen of other specialists, Stanzel found himself on a bus with darkened windows, traveling to an undisclosed location in the Arizona desert. Allegedly, they were ordered by the Air Force colonel on board not to speak to each other. Their only job was to investigate the crash of a top-secret military vehicle. Upon their arrival, they were escorted by military police and taken to the crash site. Stanzel claimed the object he saw was oval-shaped, about 30 feet in diameter, and silver in color. Although one side was embedded into the desert sand, there was no visible impact damage of any kind. While this description could have been any number of things, what makes the story even more interesting, and for some even more unbelievable, was Stanzel's admission to what he saw inside a tent that was set up near the crash site. The following was taken from his official statement. A tent pitched near the object sheltered the dead remains of the only occupant of the craft. It was about 4 feet tall, dark brown complexion, and had 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and a small round mouth. It was clothed in a silvery metallic suit and wore a skull cap of the same type material. It wore no face covering or helmet. Had an EBE, or extraterrestrial biological entity, really crash land a UFO in Kingman, and had the government covered it up. Stanzel's story, although hard to believe, is still very much a part of local UFO lore, as is the case of Mr. Travis Walton. The classic 1993 sci-fi horror film, Fire in the Sky, brought Walton's story to the big screen and exposed audiences to one of the most famous abduction cases of all time. On the night of November 5, 1975, while traveling with his work crew in the forest near Snowflake, Arizona, Walton, along with his co-workers, spotted a flying saucer. Walton approached the hovering object and was suddenly knocked unconscious by a beam of light. Frightened and believing Walton had been killed, his co-workers fled the scene, leaving their friend and the mysterious object behind. When he awoke sometime later, Walton claimed he was on board the craft in some type of medical room, where he was being observed by 3 small alien beings. About a week later, Walton was returned and he found himself walking along a highway, with no recollection of how he got there. The incident has been called an elaborate hoax by skeptics for years, but Travis Walton continues to share his abduction story and insists his terrifying experience is true. While the story of a small group of loggers claiming to have seen a UFO can easily be dismissed as pure fiction, it's not so easy to declare a sighting as being fake when hundreds, maybe even thousands of people see something out of the ordinary. The mass sighting known as the Phoenix Lights incident took place on March 13, 1997. The initial report came from a man in Henderson, Nevada, who witnessed a V-shaped object move across the sky. Soon, reports were coming in from Arizona residents living in Paulden, Prescott, and Dewey. Eventually, the object with strange lights was seen in the Phoenix area, Tucson, and the Mexican state of Sonora. According to filmmaker Steve Lance, co-producer of the Phoenix Lights documentary, witnesses reported seeing a massive craft, over a mile across, flying at a very low altitude. The V-shaped object moved slowly and made no sound whatsoever. The official word from local Phoenix military personnel was that the lights people had seen were simply flares. Even further annoying the general public, 3 months after the mass sighting, Arizona Governor Fife Symington held a press conference to announce the person responsible for the incident. With news cameras rolling live, Symington's chief of staff was paraded in front of the press, dressed in an alien costume, complete with large head and long arms. Although the stunt was intended to ease the tension that had been brewing since the sighting, people who had witnessed the event felt as though their concerns were being treated as a joke. In a strange turn of events nearly a decade later, Symington came forward and admitted to seeing the craft as well. He used the phrase otherworldly to describe it, and he also said, "I'm a pilot and I know just about every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything that I've ever seen." From Tucson to Kingman, Phoenix to Snowflake, Travis Walton to William Rhodes, the state of Arizona has a long history of encounters with the unknown and the unidentified. I'd like to end this portion of the episode with a quote from a book called A Gleam of Light by T.J. Wolfe. Hopis have lived in America longer than anyone. We wanted to explore the concept of earthly visitation through the eyes of people who have also witnessed the rapid evolution of modern culture. For us, their beliefs ring true on so many levels. Hopi prophecy speaks to the destiny of man, in a universe where we are not alone. Up next, the Weekend Creepshow Report, where I talk about my visit to Arizona's best horror film convention, Mad Monster Party 2018.
The good, the bad, and everything in between. It's the Weekend Creepshow Report.
I've been going to fan conventions for a long time. I've attended San Diego Comic-Con twice, Phoenix Comic-Con, and of course Tucson's Con. They've all been great, but Mad Monster Party is something totally different in the best possible way. because it's genre specific. So wall-to-wall horror, and it's amazing. One of the top guests for this year's con was Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund. During the panel discussion, he spoke very highly of the late great Wes Craven, which was extremely heartwarming. Because you never really know what goes on behind the scenes, and it was nice to know he and Mr. Craven were friends. He also spoke about how he landed the role of Freddy, and told an amusing story about how he found inspiration to scare the hell out of his young co-stars. This was one of my favorite moments.
So I would be hanging out with these guys, getting my makeup on at 5 in the morning. And the teamsters are always trying out their new dirty jokes on you. So I would go to the makeup room later, and I'd try not on Heather, because it was my way of kind of not being Robert, but being Freddy, because I had this makeup on, and I could get away with it. I could get away with being the dirty, nasty old uncle, And also it helped me be able to tease Heather and be able to kind of get her loose, because I had to throw her around, I had to throw her across the room, and I had to get her confidence. I think I left over the course of 3 or 4 movies with Heather. I think I left thumbprints on her at least a half a dozen times, because when your energy is so high in those scenes, and she gives as good as she gets, she's feisty too. So we had this kind of great relationship that way, where I would tease her a lot. And she also helped me find the key to Freddy. On the first movie, we shot it in June and July, again in the old Desi studios in the center of Hollywood. And it was hot. And I had been there since 4 in the morning getting my makeup on, and it was like 9 in the morning. It was getting warmer. I was being touched up with a stiff brush that had crusty glue on it, that they used to put my prosthetics on. And David Miller was stabbing me with his brush, and I was like sweating under the makeup, and it was hot, and it was in the old barber's chair from the Desi Studios that probably, had Lucy Butt on it and Desi Butt on it. And in comes Johnny Depp at 9 in the morning and Heather Langenkamp, quite possibly the 2 most beautiful people in the world, with their whole careers ahead of them, the most beautiful complexions. Pimples are not allowed within a mile of either. They're gorgeous. Johnny had the perfect Elvis hair, and he was a rockabilly fan. He could let go like that, and his hair just went glum. Perfect hair. Heather is so beautiful, and they're sitting there, and the makeup girl starts putting makeup on them, and I'm thinking, I'm getting punked with this goddamn brush. and I'm thinking, I don't know, Robert, did you do the right thing taking this horror movie? You've been up since 4 in the morning. And I'm looking over at these 2 beautiful young actors, their whole lives, their whole careers ahead of them, and they're getting makeup. They don't need makeup. What are they getting makeup for? Then the makeup girl gives them each a little plastic battery-operated fan to keep them cool. And they're sitting there with their little damn pink plastic fans, keeping themselves cool. And I'm over here, and I'm getting basted like a Thanksgiving turkey with KY jelly and God knows what else. And I'm really getting angry, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm jealous of them. I'm envious of them. I have this anger for them. I can use that. It's an old actor's trick, because their youth, they're young, they're beauty. What does Freddy do? He's a child killer. What's he killing? The children. They're the future. Freddy's killing the future. So it became a very thing that I could pop into my brain anytime I was working with him on the set. I could remember that moment in the makeup room that morning, and that jealousy and that envy and that anger I felt and that doubt about the decision to play Freddy, and I could use it as an equivalent emotion for what Freddy could be thinking. And I could, it's an old actor's trick, it's like a synapse. It's like once you have that thought, or you discover something like that in a rehearsal, or even at home working on a script, it just comes back to you instantly. Once you found it, you just can repeat it. It's right, it's in there. You just call it up. You'll remember it. So that was my sort of insight and the key that I used to get really angry with those kids. So when you see Freddy chasing people around or wiping the ceiling with Amanda Wiss, I'm really just pissed at them because they're a lot younger than me. They're going up their better parts.
Later on, I got to actually meet Mr. Englund one-on-one for a photo op. I was wearing a shirt that said, "Ghouls just want to have fun," because I'm nerdy like that. And when I approached him for the picture, he started singing "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," but replaced the first part with ghouls. I don't really get starstruck, but there was a moment where I thought, I cannot believe Robert Englund is singing a Cyndi Lauper song to me right now. Being very much a child of the 80s, that scenario happening was just incredible, and what makes fan conventions so much fun. I also got to meet actor Mitch Pileggi. Pileggi has been in a million things. Supernatural, Stargate Atlantis, Sons of Anarchy. He was Horace Pinker in Wes Craven's film Shocker. And of course, my personal favorite, FBI Assistant Director Walter Skinner in The X-Files. Everyone who knows me understands how big a fan I am of that series. Meeting him was unbelievably awesome. I called him Sir, which he seemed okay with. He probably thought I was just being polite, but really I've just been exposed to a lot of Dana Scully these past 25 years. On the series, she addressed him as Sir. And as I was speaking to him, my brain couldn't bring itself to call him Mitch or Mr. Pileggi. Here he is discussing a recent appearance at a convention with co-star David Duchovny.
Another question out there? Yes, right here.
What are you watching? I mean, we all...
Well, I watched Goliath, I watched Animal Kingdom. Well, you know, people ask me that, my mind just goes blank. But there's a lot of stuff on what? Tell me, give me some ideas.
Were you ancient aliens?
You know, I met all those guys. David and I did the Alien Con in Pasadena. So we met all those guys. It was a mood. It was like I was like a building full of molders. I swear to God, these guys, when David walked into the room, they just about crapped their pants. They were crying. I mean, they were crying. It was like, it was so funny and sane and sweet and charming, you know.
Seriously, and I've probably said this before, if you love horror films and horror TV, please go to your next local horror con. If you happen to live here in Arizona, make it a point to attend Mad Monster Party. Hope to see you there next year. That's it for this episode of El Presidio Project. Make sure to check out elpresidioproject.com for pictures and other stuff related to this episode and the convention. Until next time all, bye-bye.